My name is Dziemianko. I represent Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, Poland. The topic of my presentation is a question. Are the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary and the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English online comparably useful? A case of English articles. Today, monolingual learners' dictionaries cater for foreign learners and coding needs, and this is one of their defining characteristics. But it's not known if online monolingual learners' dictionaries help users correct errors in articles and learn article usage, which is notoriously difficult. It would also be interesting to see if two major online monolingual learners' dictionaries, OALD and LDOCE, differ in their usefulness in these respects. We know from previous research that paper versions of other major monolingual learners' dictionaries, for example, proved comparably useful in production and reception. But the electronic medium may be expected to have made up for the loss of individuality visible in learners' dictionaries in the 1990s. The aim of the study is to compare the usefulness of online OALD and LDOCE for correcting errors in articles and learning article usage. I would also like to see if the dictionaries affect error correction time and whether users consider their consultation difficult. The following research questions are asked. Do the dictionaries help to correct errors in articles? Is either dictionary more useful for error correction than the other? Do the dictionaries affect learning the use of articles? Is either dictionary a better learning tool? Does the time of dictionary-based error correction depend on the dictionary used? Is the perceived difficulty in dictionary use dependent on the dictionary? To answer the research questions, I conducted an online experiment which consisted of a pre-test, a main test, and a post-test. The three stages of the experiment were built around 10 English sentences with errors in articles. In the pre-test, participants corrected the errors without any resources. In the main test, with the help of an online dictionary, either OALD or LDOCE, and in the post-test, the errors were corrected from memory. The experiment was followed by a short questionnaire which investigated the participants' dictionary using habits and perception of OALD and LDOCE consultation difficulty. The sentences used in the experiment were drawn from the Longman Dictionary of Common Errors. Here we have a simple task. This is a sentence with an error in article usage and a link to a dictionary entry from OALD, which should be consulted to correct the sentence. This is what participants saw after clicking the link. This is the same task, but the link takes users to an entry from LDOCE. Which looks like this, but the target structure, the disabled, is given as a cross-reference in sense 2. So we need to click on this cross-reference to land at the entry for the disabled, which contains the information necessary to correct the errors in the test sentence. The survey consisted of two questions. In the first one, the participants were asked whether they had used OALD and LDOCE before the experiment. And in the second one, they were requested to evaluate on a 5-point Likert scale, the perceived difficulty in using OALD and LDOCE in the study, with 1 denoting no difficulty at all and 5 extreme difficulty. 292 upper intermediate learners of English took part in the study. 154 of them were assigned to work with OALD in the main test, and the other 138 without those. The questionnaire revealed that prior to the experiment, the groups had had comparable experience of using both dictionaries. So now let's talk about the results. In this study, dictionary was an independent variable of two levels, OALD and LDOCE. It was a between groups factor since each participant had access to only one dictionary. Error correction accuracy rates in the pre-test, main test, and post-tests were treated as dependent variables representing 3 repeated measurements on the same subjects, before, during, and after exposure to a dictionary. A 2x3 multivariate analysis of variance was conducted, and the Bonferroni test was computed when multivariate test results were significant. The interaction between dictionary and error correction accuracy was statistically significant. The OALD group corrected over twice as many errors with the dictionary as before and after consultation. But OALD did not make the subjects learn article usage in comparison with their initial knowledge. With the help of LDOCE, on the other hand, over 3 times as many errors were corrected as at the beginning of the experiment. The LDOCE group corrected 2.5 times as many errors in the post-test as in the pre-test. In fact, they retained as many as 85% of the corrections from the main test. The retention rate was actually as good as the success rate when LDOCE was accessed. Now let's compare the effectiveness of the dictionaries. The subjects working with the 2 dictionaries corrected comparably many errors in the pre-test and in the main test. But LDOCE helped to remember about half of the corrections, while OALD only about 1/4. So LDOCE facilitated learning over 100% more about article usage than OALD. Now, let's analyze the time of task performance. The Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary group needed on average 39 seconds to correct a sentence, and the LDOCE group 54 seconds, which was a statistically significant difference. Now I would like to say a few words about the survey results. I have already commented on the subject's experience with OALD and LDOCE, so let me talk about the perceived difficulty in using the 2 dictionaries. 30% of OALD users and 69% of LDOCE users considered it extremely, very, or somewhat difficult to find relevant information in the dictionaries. And by the same token, 70% of OALD users and 31% of LDOCE users experienced no or no serious problems. The subjective evaluation of consultation difficulty was dependent on the dictionary. It's clear that LDOCE was seen as more difficult to use than OALD. A difficulty index was computed to assess the general difficulty in using the dictionaries as seen by the participants. The percentages from the previous slide were weighted by the values assigned to them on the Likert scale and expressed in absolute terms. The difficulty index was 2.3 for OALD and 2.9 for LDOCE, so LDOCE was seen as more difficult to use than OALD. So, let's try to draw some conclusions. Both dictionaries helped to correct errors in articles in comparison with the pretest. Error correction assisted by both dictionaries was comparably successful. And these are answers to my first two research questions. OALD did not stimulate learning article usage at all, but LDOCE did. And this conclusion answers research question 3. In fact, LDOCE proves to be a significantly better learning tool than OALD, which is an answer to research question 4. However, error correction based on simultaneous dictionary consultation took significantly longer when LDOCE was used, and this is an answer to research question 5. LDOCE was also considered more difficult to consult, which answers research question 6. The most surprising finding is that LDOCE is the best learning tool, even though its consultation is the most time-consuming and is considered the most difficult to use. So let's look at possible reasons for these seemingly contradictory results. On the one hand, the involvement load hypothesis assumes that deeper involvement leads to better learning, search being an involvement factor. So greater difficulty in accessing information could improve. Given that clicking or tapping hyperlinks requires more effort than instantaneous access to information, it might be hypothesized that the more effortful path boosts learning. In two LDOCE entries for British and disabled, there are clickable cross-references to the entries for the British and the disabled. These are treated as subsenses in OALD, which saves users from clicking, and previous research shows that dictionary users do not like clicking and prefer scrolling to clicking. Here we see screenshots of the entry for British in the two dictionaries. The British is a hypertext cross-reference in LDOCE and sense2 in OALD. For this test item, the British, the difference in retention between these two dictionaries was statistically significant. The LDOCE group remembered the correct article usage about twice more frequently than the OALD group. It is also worth mentioning that both dictionaries feature extra examples. OALD offers clickable extra examples, and in LDOCE they are visible by default, as is in the case of AIDS, for which retention was also significantly better among LDOCE users. Research shows that clickable extra examples are often ignored by dictionary users. If they are visible by default, like in LDOCE, users have access to more data which they can analyze. This naturally takes time, but results in better learning. There might be another reason for the longer time of LDOCE consultation. In this dictionary, there happen to be examples which might have been misleading, considering the specific errors to be corrected in the test. For instance, the definite article was unnecessary in the test sentence with AIDS. Diseases such as the AIDS cause a lot of suffering, but in LDOCE, users saw an example saying the AIDS virus. Analyzing this LDOCE example and providing a correct answer might require more time and no doubt more analysis, but resulted in significantly better learning than in the case of OALD. The longer time spent on entry analysis might be expected to strengthen the memory trace and improve meaning retention, as it might suggest deeper cognitive involvement in processing meaning. At this point, I would like to refer to Sweller and his cognitive load theory. He distinguishes three types of cognitive load: extraneous, germane, and intrinsic. Extraneous cognitive load is related to the way in which information is presented or activities in which learners are involved. Germane cognitive load refers to working memory resources that the learner devotes to the intrinsic cognitive load associated with the information to be learned, and it's not controlled by the learner. Intrinsic cognitive load is the natural complexity of information that must be understood and learned, and it's unalterable. Extraneous, intrinsic, and germane cognitive load are additive. The aim of instruction should be to reduce extraneous load and increase germane load so that more working memory resources can be invested in processing unalterable intrinsic load rather than wasted on dealing with an inappropriate design. LDOCE most likely put a lower extraneous cognitive load on the participants' working memory than OALD. This increased germane loading, which resulted in better retention. So what I'm trying to say is that the extended time of task performance in the case of LDOCE does not have to indicate a greater extraneous cognitive load. It might result from an increased germane load. Here we see screenshots of the entry for river in the two dictionaries. The LDOCE entry is shorter, has a clearer layout and distinct colors. It's somehow easier for the user to find information there. And for river, the retention of correct article usage was significantly better among LDOCE users, who also spent twice as much time on the task performance as OALD users. So it's possible that the LDOCE entry imposed lower extraneous loading, which increased germane loading among its users and improved learning. So the extended time of task performance might be indicative of increased germane loading. The study has a number of limitations. Only few sentences were employed in the experiment, and the participants' dictionary activity was not logged. We don't know whether any cross-references or extra examples were really accessed. I didn't check long-term retention either. Besides, the success rate for error correction in the main test approximated 50%, which is not that much. This suggests that users have a problem with extracting information about article usage from the dictionaries. So maybe more attention to dictionary use should be paid at school. The study was also naturalistic in the sense that real dictionary entries were used and not entries fabricated for the purpose of the experiment. But because of this, causal links are difficult to establish. The dictionaries differ in many respects, and it's only possible to hypothesize about possible reasons for the obtained results. Future studies might benefit from a more controlled research design, in which purpose-built entries would be used in place of real ones. This will make it possible to precisely isolate specific variables related to entry design and examine their role. It should also be useful to log dictionary activity to see, for example, if links are clicked. And no doubt long-term effects of learning article usage should also be tested. Thank you very much for your kind attention.